Hey guys, it's Amy with 804 Sycamore, and in this video I'm going to show you how I wallpapered fabric to our powder room wall. So our powder room has board and batten on the bottom half of the wall, and I thought about removing it and doing the whole wall, floor to ceiling, with fabric. Thought it would look pretty stunning, you know, like how wallpaper would make a really big impact in a small space. But my teenage daughter Sawyer said, no, keep the board and batten. I love the board and batten. So we're going to keep it for now, maybe forever, who knows. I am going to add some hooks across the top, just give it a little more flair and functionality, but above the board and batten is where I'll be adding the fabric. And I can't wait to show you the simple technique that I'm going to use. Now, I think this is probably a renter-friendly project. Supposedly it can be removed with just water, and then you just can wipe the walls clean. I think it kind of depends on your paint job. So you may want to do just a test, like take a little 3x3 piece of fabric, try the technique, let it totally dry, and then test removing it with a spray bottle of water to loosen up the adhesive and then taking it off. And that's what I would do if I were renting. I'm not recommending that you do this at a rental. Maybe you ask for permission, but it's ideally supposed to be great to be able to put up easily and affordably, and then to remove with no damage to the wall. That is the idea. I have not tested the removal, so try at your own risk. But I hope you will consider trying, because it's a very cool way to add a wallpapered look to your wall using fabric. And I got my fabric for 50% off at Joann's, and I checked Hobby Lobby and they had some cool patterns, but I loved the one I found at Joann's and it was on sale, so even better. But without further ado, let's get started to show you just how easy this technique is. If you like the video, please press that like button and be sure to subscribe for more DIY and decorating videos. All right, let's go. So the first step to get started is to make sure your fabric is nice and smooth. You might have to iron it if there are severe wrinkles or creases. And then I'm using push pins and allowing a little overhang up against my ceiling. And I'm having a hammer in some of it because we have some studs in the corners and ceilings. And so I'm pulling it smooth and tight across the ceiling and making sure there is overhang on both the left and right side. Now my pattern is asymmetrical, so I don't have to use a laser level and make sure my stripes or pattern is perfectly level. That's something to consider when you pick out your fabric. I use push pins to get this fabric out of the way, and I'm adding about a foot down of liquid starch. I thought I would have to allow it to dry before continuing, but that wasn't the case. So put a little bit of liquid starch, roll some liquid starch on with a foam roller on the wall, and then smooth out your fabric. And then as you roll it onto the fabric, you're going to completely saturate the fabric. This is what creates the stick and the bond. Again, it's not permanent. You can totally remove this with just a squirt bottle of water and gently peeling it off, because liquid starch isn't actual adhesive. It just works that way in this case. And so I'm having to adjust my push pins. Now, if you use thumbtacks, they're going to be harder to get out. So that's why I would recommend push pins. And I also like this sponge roller because it doesn't have any nap to fling starch at me. So once I realized I could go ahead and continue, I kind of rolled it up, held it out of the way with my hand instead of pinning it back up. And again, you want to go ahead and roll on liquid starch all over your wall. Now, if you have a huge surface, do it in smaller sections. This is probably about a 4x5 space roughly, and my wall doesn't have any texture, and so everything went on smooth and easy. Now it will work with like maybe an orange peel textured wall. Anything a high relief texture might have a little bit of problem, but it's worth a shot to test. Now for the edges, I also used some push pins to really get the fabric smooth and in the corners as best as I can. Don't worry too much about the edges yet. We will address that when the liquid starch is completely dry. At this point, you can see the difference between the wet fabric and the dry. And honestly, you just want to take your time making sure you get liquid starch over all of your fabric. I'm just using a 4-inch roller, but this was a smaller space. In case I didn't mention it before, you are also going to want to tape around your edges. If you don't, it's not a huge deal. I just wanted to protect my other walls and trim work from the starch. Otherwise, you can just wipe it off with a wet rag when you're done. The nice thing about my fabric is when it was wet, I could easily see the difference, and so I was able to kind of touch up some of the dry spots and tack in all the edges. Now I waited overnight for it to dry. Just make sure it's completely dry before this next step. For the next step, we will be trimming off the excess around all 4 edges, and this is a lot like the step in wallpapering, and so you'll want to get a one of those break-off razor blades. It's retractable, and because whenever your blade gets dull, you're going to just want to snap it off and use a new one. To get a straight edge, I'm using a 12-inch taping knife, and I'm really just getting it into the corner as tightly as I can, making sure the fabric is completely smooth. And sometimes the blade won't cut through a piece of fabric, and so you can just snap off one of your blades and try again, but be careful when you pull down the fabric. So we're just using the taping knife to get in there, and then the razor blade cuts off the edge. And you're going to notice some of the fabric is not stuck to the wall. Don't worry about that, it's no problem. We needed the fabric to be stiff from the starch and able to allow us to cut it a nice straight line, and then we will address attaching it to the wall as soon as we're done cutting all 4 edges. So this part of the process is just like wallpapering, except I will concede it's easier than trimming wallpaper because the fabric is pliable and flexible. Just it was easier to get the taping knife in there and run the blade directly. With paper, sometimes it gets a little bit bunched. And it was more difficult for me to cut a straight edge on paper when I did my mural wallpaper, and I will add a link to that in the description in case you're interested. It's a very beautiful wallpaper from Anthropology, and when I look at this fabric, I'm thinking maybe I should have done fabric. It would have been cheaper too. So anyways, now that your edges are off, you still have the tape there to protect your wall, and I'm just taking a paintbrush and adding more starch to all of the edges, and when you see that it's wet and that it's sticking, then you know that you're good to go. And if your fabric isn't immediately sticking when it becomes wet from the starch, do not worry, just be patient and keep running the brush over the same edge. It will work out, it will be fine, and if you need to, maybe kind of pull back the fabric and add some more to the wall just to get that adhesive type situation going on. But this is the very last step before removing all the tape. Now I removed the tape before my starch dried because I thought, oh, if it dries it might lift up the fabric when I'm removing it. So as soon as I knew I was done, remove the tape. Okay, after drying overnight, this is the way it looks, and I am so happy with it. I absolutely love it. It feels nice, it looks nice, it adds a great pop of color to the bathroom. And be sure to subscribe because I'm doing more to this space on the other side. New sink, some tile, and artwork. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you are inspired to wallpaper with some fabric. All right, have a great day. Thanks.